Daniel Hayes limped through the rain-soaked streets of New Haven's industrial quarter, his worn jacket doing little to keep out the cold. The colony world had promised opportunities for veterans like him, but that was before the economy collapsed and the government forgot about soldiers who fought in wars nobody wanted to remember anymore. His damaged leg throbbed with each step, a reminder of the day a Dravesh plasma rifle had nearly ended his life. He reached his apartment building, a crumbling structure that leaned slightly to one side. The elevator never worked, so he climbed 4 flights of stairs, gripping the rusted railing for support. Inside his small room, he collapsed onto the threadbare couch and counted the credits left on his datapad. 12, enough for maybe 3 more days of food if he stretched it. A sharp knock interrupted his calculations. Daniel frowned. Nobody visited him. He opened the door to find 3 massive figures in ornate armor standing in the narrow hallway. Dravesh. Their reptilian features were impossible to mistake, scales gleaming even in the dim light, eyes that glowed with an inner fire. Daniel Hayes? The lead guard's voice rumbled like distant thunder. Yeah, what do you want? We come bearing a decree from King Osmar of the Dravesh Empire. The guard produced a crystalline tablet that projected a holographic image of an enormous dragon, crimson and gold, wearing ceremonial regalia. 5 years ago, you saved the life of Commander Rothak during the Battle of Meridian Station. This created a life debt under our law, Daniel remembered. The Dravesh soldier had been trapped under debris, bleeding out. Daniel had pulled him free despite the danger. Despite everything the war had taught him about treating enemies as anything other than targets. I remember, so what? The debt is now called. His Majesty has an heir who cannot remain among our people. By ancient law, such offspring must be given to an outsider who holds a life debt or face execution. You will accept this responsibility. Before Daniel could respond, the guards parted. A 4th Dravesh carried a large container into the apartment. They set it down with surprising gentleness, then unsealed the top. Inside, huddled against the corner, was a small dragon. Bronze scales caught the light as she raised her head, amber eyes wide with fear. This is Pyra, youngest daughter of King Osmar. She is mute, incapable of producing the flame songs sacred to our culture. She is therefore cursed and cannot remain among the Dravesh. Daniel stared at the creature. She was about the size of a large dog, wings folded tight against her body, tail wrapped around her legs. She looked terrified. I can't take care of a dragon. I can barely feed myself. You have no choice. Refuse and both you and Pyra will be executed for violating the life debt. The guard placed a small credit chip on the table. This will cover basic expenses for 1 solar cycle. After that, you are on your own. The king has fulfilled his obligation. They left without another word, their footsteps echoing down the stairwell. Daniel stood frozen, looking at the small dragon in his apartment. She stared back at him, trembling slightly. Well, Daniel said quietly, I guess we're both screwed. Pyra made no sound. Her mouth opened as if to respond, but nothing emerged except a faint whisper of breath. She closed it again, turning her head away. Daniel approached slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. Hey, I'm not going to hurt you. I know this situation isn't what either of us wanted. He kept his voice calm, the same tone he had used with injured soldiers. You're scared, I get it. But we're stuck with each other now, so we might as well figure this out. The dragon watched him with those intelligent eyes. There was understanding there, he realized. She comprehended every word even if she could not respond. He pulled out his datapad and searched for information about Dravesh dietary needs. Protein-based high heat tolerance required certain minerals for scale health. He looked at the credit chip the guards had left. It contained 10,000 credits, a fortune compared to what he had, but not nearly enough if he had to buy specialized dragon food. Let me see what I can do about dinner, he told Pyra. He left the apartment, making his way to the market district. With careful shopping, he bought protein blocks, mineral supplements, and some basic supplies. The vendors gave him strange looks when he explained what he needed. When he returned, Pyra had moved. She had explored the small apartment and settled near the window, looking out at the rain. Daniel set the food near her and backed away, giving her space. She sniffed at the protein blocks but did not eat. Hours passed. Daniel made himself a simple meal and ate in silence. He pulled out an old harmonica from his military kit, a habit he had picked up during the war. The notes were rough, unpracticed, but they filled the quiet apartment with something other than tension. Pyra's head lifted. She turned toward him, tilting her head as if listening to something fascinating. Daniel continued playing, watching her reaction. When he stopped, she made a sound. Not words, but a deep hum that resonated in her chest. It was the first noise she had made since arriving. "You like music?" Daniel asked. She hummed again, the vibration seeming to fill the room. It was not unpleasant. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern that felt almost like communication. Daniel set the harmonica aside and tapped his fingers on the floor in a simple beat. Pyrrha watched intently. Then carefully she tapped her clawed foot against the floor, mimicking the rhythm. 3 taps, pause, 2 taps. "Well, I'll be damned," Daniel whispered. "You're not mute at all. You just speak differently." The dragon's eyes brightened. She hummed again, this time with what sounded like relief. Someone finally understood. Daniel smiled for the first time in months. "All right, Pyrrha, let's figure this out together." Outside, the rain continued falling on New Haven, but inside the small apartment, something new had begun. 2 outcasts thrown together by fate were finding a language all their own. 3 weeks had crawled by since Pyrrha arrived. The neighbors complained constantly about the noise, though Daniel tried explaining it was not his fault when she knocked over furniture during nightmares. His landlord, a bitter man named Graves, had visited twice to threaten eviction. The credit chip from King Osmar was dwindling faster than Daniel had hoped. Pyrrha still refused most of the food he offered. She would nibble at protein blocks late at night when she thought he was asleep, but never ate properly. Daniel worried she was starving herself. Her scales had lost some of their luster, and she spent most days curled in the corner humming softly to herself. He tried everything. Different foods, different temperatures, different arrangements. Nothing worked. One evening, frustrated and exhausted, Daniel sat on the floor near her. "Look, I know you hate it here. I know you miss your home, even if they treated you like garbage. But you have to eat something. I'm trying my best, but I don't know what you need." Pyrrha lifted her head. Her amber eyes studied him for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to the window, pressing her snout against the glass. She hummed 3 times, a rising pitch that sounded like a question. Daniel joined her at the window. Below, the street market was in full swing. Vendors sold everything from fresh produce to scrap metal. He watched Pyrrha's gaze fix on a particular stall where a woman was grilling meat over an open flame. "You want fresh meat? Cooked meat?" Pyrrha's tail swished once. Her version of a yes he had learned. "The protein blocks are cheaper, but if that's what you need." Daniel checked his remaining credits and winced. This would hurt. He grabbed his jacket. "Come on then." Getting a dragon through the crowded streets of New Haven drew attention. People stopped and stared. Children pointed. A few adults pulled their kids away, fear evident on their faces. Daniel ignored them all, focusing on keeping Pyrrha close as they navigated to the market. The meat vendor, an older woman with kind eyes, did not flinch when she saw Pyrrha. "Well now, that's not something you see every day. What can I get you?" "Whatever she wants," Daniel said. The vendor held out several samples. Pyrrha sniffed each carefully before selecting strips of something that resembled beef. The woman cooked them fresh, the smell making Pyrrha's whole body quiver with anticipation. When the meat was ready, properly charred and still hot, Pyrrha ate with an enthusiasm Daniel had not seen from her before. "There we go," the vendor said, smiling. Nothing wrong with her appetite. Just needed the right food. She looked at Daniel. "You're the veteran, right? The one taking care of the cursed dragon. Word travels fast. In the slums, everything travels fast. You need help, you come to me. Name's Ruth. I don't have much, but I know what it's like to be forgotten by people who should care." Daniel nodded his thanks and paid for a week's worth of meat. It consumed most of his remaining credits, but seeing Pyrrha eat properly was worth it. They walked back through a different route, one less crowded. That was when trouble found them. 3 men stepped out from an alley, blocking their path. Daniel recognized the tattoos. Local gang members who controlled the black market in this sector. "That's a fine dragon you got there," the leader said. His smile did not reach his eyes. "Dragon scales fetch good money. We could use some new inventory." Daniel's hand instinctively went to his hip, but he carried no weapon. His military days were long over. "She's not for sale." "Move aside," White wasn't asking. The leader pulled a shock baton. His companions spread out, flanking them. Pyrrha moved in front of Daniel, her body low and tense. She might be young, but she was still a dragon. Her humming changed pitch, becoming deeper, almost threatening. Small wisps of smoke curled from her nostrils. The gang members hesitated. The leader recovered first. She can't even breathe fire properly. What's she going to do, hum us to death? He lunged forward with the baton. Daniel threw himself at the man despite his bad leg, tackling him to the ground. Pain shot through his injured limb, but adrenaline kept him fighting. He wrestled the baton away and cracked it against the man's ribs. The other 2 gang members rushed forward. Pyra intercepted one, her claws raking across his arm. He screamed and stumbled back. She could not breathe flame, but her teeth and claws worked just fine. The 3rd man grabbed Daniel from behind, trying to choke him. Daniel drove his elbow back hard, feeling something crack. The grip loosened. He spun and hit the man with the baton, dropping him. The leader was getting up, reaching for something in his jacket. A knife glinted in the dim light. Pyra's hum became a roar. It was not sound in the traditional sense, but a vibration that made Daniel's bones shake. The 3 gang members clutched their heads, disoriented. Windows in nearby buildings cracked. The vibration built and built until the men turned and ran, desperate to escape the overwhelming sensation. Silence fell. Daniel leaned against the wall, breathing hard, his legs screaming in protest. Pyra approached him, nudging his hand with her snout. She hummed softly, a concerned sound. "I'm okay," he managed. "You did good. Real good." They made it back to the apartment. Daniel collapsed on the couch while Pyra settled beside him, closer than she had ever been before. He reached out hesitantly and scratched behind the bony ridge above her eyes. She leaned into the touch, purring. "You protected me," Daniel said quietly. "Your own father threw you away, but you still protected some broken human you barely know." Pyra's eyes met his. In them, he saw something he recognized from his own reflection. Loneliness. The desperate need to matter to someone, anyone. They were the same, he realized. Both discarded by the systems that should have valued them. "We're going to figure this out," Daniel promised. "Whatever you are, whatever you can do, we'll find a way to show the galaxy you're not cursed. You're just different." And different can be powerful. Pyra hummed her agreement. For the first time since arriving, she fell asleep not in the corner, but beside Daniel. 2 outcasts who had finally found someone who understood. Daniel found work repairing machinery at an abandoned factory on the edge of New Haven's industrial sector. The pay was minimal, but it was something. Pyra came with him, curious about the old equipment and rusted structures that filled the massive space. She explored while he worked, her humming echoing off metal walls. He was rewiring a control panel when Pyra's humming changed. The sound took on a strange quality, resonating with the metal around them. Daniel looked up and froze. The vibration from Pyra's chest was creating visible patterns in the dust on nearby surfaces. Concentric circles formed and shifted, mathematical and precise. "Pyra, come here," he called. She trotted over, tilting her head in question. Daniel found a flat sheet of metal and sprinkled some fine rust particles across it. "Do that humming again." "The deep one," Pyra obliged. The rust particles began moving, forming intricate geometric patterns across the metal surface. They shifted and changed with each variation in her hum, creating designs that looked almost like language. Daniel's engineering mind recognized what he was seeing. Resonance patterns, wave interference, physical manifestations of sound frequencies. "You're not just making noise," he whispered. "You're creating data structures." He spent the rest of the day experimenting. Different materials responded differently to Pyra's humming. Water created standing wave patterns, sand formed complex spirals. Certain metals rang like bells, while others absorbed the vibrations and grew warm. Glass crystals, when arranged properly, produced light refractions that painted rainbows across the factory floor. Daniel pulled out his data pad and started recording everything. He measured frequencies, mapped patterns, documented which materials responded to which pitches. Pyra seemed to understand they had discovered something important. She cooperated with every test, humming different tones on request. As the sun set, Daniel sat surrounded by his notes and recordings. The Dravesh use flame songs, right? Basically just vocal performances with fire effects. Pretty but limited to audio communication. He looked at Pyra. "But you're interfacing with physical matter. You're using harmonic resonance to manipulate the world around you." Pyra hummed softly as if agreeing. "They called you cursed because you couldn't do what they wanted. But you can do something they never imagined. You can speak to the universe in a language nobody else knows." Over the following days, Daniel became obsessed with understanding Pyra's abilities. He scavenged parts from the factory, building crude instruments to amplify and focus her resonance. A simple parabolic dish made from an old satellite receiver could direct her humming with precision. Arranged crystals could transform her vibrations into visible light displays. The breakthrough came when Daniel attached a salvaged computer interface to his makeshift equipment. Pyra hummed into the collection array, and the computer screen lit up with cascading data. Not random noise, but structured information, patterns that repeated and evolved. She was transmitting meaning even if he did not yet know how to translate it. "We need better equipment," Daniel said, "and someone who understands xenobiology better than a broke mechanic." He remembered hearing about a scientist at New Haven's small research facility, Dr. Rebecca Lynn, a human who studied alien communication methods. Daniel sent her a message with some of his recordings, not expecting a response. To his surprise, she arrived at the factory the next morning. Rebecca was younger than Daniel expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked at his makeshift laboratory and smiled. "This is incredible. How long have you known about her abilities?" "About a week. I'm still figuring it out." Rebecca approached Pyra carefully, respectfully. "May I run some tests? Non-invasive, just sensors and recordings." Pyra looked at Daniel. He nodded. "It's your choice." The dragon hummed once, her tail swishing in agreement. Rebecca worked for hours using professional equipment that made Daniel's salvaged tools look like toys. She measured Pyra's resonance across multiple spectrums, analyzed the harmonic patterns, and even tested her ability to interact with different types of technology. "This is revolutionary," Rebecca said finally. "She's not just creating vibrations. She's using quantum resonance to interact with molecular structures. Do you understand what this means? She can sense structural weaknesses in materials, detect changes in atmospheric composition, possibly even interface directly with neural patterns." "The Dravesh called her cursed," Daniel said bitterly. "The Dravesh are idiots. This is evolution. She represents the next step in her species, and they threw her away because she didn't fit their cultural expectations." Rebecca looked at her data. With proper training and equipment, she could revolutionize communication, materials science, even medicine. Her abilities are worth more than 1,000 flame songs. "Can you help us develop them? I want to publish research on this. Show the galaxy what she can do, but that will attract attention." Rebecca's expression grew serious. The Dravesh Empire won't like humans claiming their princess is more valuable than they realized, especially not when it makes them look foolish for casting her out. Daniel understood the risk, but Pyra deserved to have her voice heard, even if that voice operated on frequencies others could not perceive. "Let's do it." They spent the next week building a proper resonance chamber. It was a framework of carefully tuned materials that amplified and focused Pyra's humming. With it, she could project her vibrations much farther and with greater precision. More importantly, they connected it to a translation matrix that converted her harmonic patterns into visual and audio formats others could understand. The first time Pyra used the completed chamber, Daniel heard her voice. Not words exactly, but emotional content translated into sounds he could comprehend. Joy, curiosity, gratitude, and underneath it all, a question that had haunted her entire life. Why was I not enough? Daniel's throat tightened. He stepped into the chamber with her, placing his hand on her scaled head. "You were always enough. They just couldn't see it." Pyra's humming wrapped around him, a sensation of warmth and belonging. For the first time, she could truly express herself, and he could truly understand. They were not just companions anymore. They were family. Rebecca's research paper spread through academic networks faster than anyone anticipated. Within days, xenobiologists across the galaxy were debating the implications of Pyra's unique abilities. Some praised the discovery as groundbreaking. Others questioned whether a dragon cast out as cursed could truly possess such valuable talents. But everyone was talking about the human veteran and the princess nobody wanted. Daniel tried to keep life normal. He worked his repair jobs, took care of Pyra, and avoided thinking about what would happen when the Dravesh Empire learned what they had done. That peace lasted exactly 2 weeks. The Dravesh diplomatic vessel arrived in orbit without warning. Within hours, a full delegation demanded an audience at New Haven's administrative center. Daniel received a summons that was not quite an arrest warrant but felt like one. He left Pyra with Rebecca and went to face whatever came next. The meeting room felt too small for the 4 Dravesh diplomats who occupied it. Their scaled forms radiated barely contained hostility. The lead diplomat, a silver-scaled male named Torvis, spoke with cold formality. You have violated the terms of the life debt arrangement. Pyra was given to you for safekeeping, not for experimentation. I didn't experiment on her. I helped her discover abilities your people never looked for. Daniel kept his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. She's not cursed. You just didn't understand her. You presumed to lecture us about our own species. Torvis leaned forward. King Osmar was merciful in allowing her to live. Your interference dishonors that mercy. Mercy? You threw away a child because she was different. That's not mercy. That's cowardice. The room temperature seemed to rise as the Dravesh radiating anger. One of the younger diplomats actually released a puff of smoke from her nostrils. Torvis raised a clawed hand, demanding silence. The king has ordered Pyra's immediate return. She will face proper judgment for the disruption you have caused. Daniel's blood ran cold. Proper judgment? You mean execution? I mean correction. She must be taught her place away from human corruption. You have 3 days to comply. If you refuse, the king will consider it an act of aggression against the Dravesh Empire. Torvis stood. Be wise, Daniel Hayes. You are one broken soldier. We are an empire. This is not a fight you can win. They left without waiting for a response. Daniel sat alone in the empty room, hands shaking. 3 days. He had 3 days to figure out how to protect Pyra from her own father. He returned to Rebecca's laboratory where Pyra waited. She knew something was wrong the moment she saw his face. Her humming turned anxious, questioning. The resonance chamber translated her emotions into words he could hear. What happened? Are they taking me back? They want you back. They're calling it judgment, but we both know what it really means. Daniel knelt beside her. I won't let them take you. I just need to figure out how. Rebecca paced the laboratory. We need legal standing. If we can prove Pyra has sentience and autonomy, we can appeal to the Galactic Council for Species Rights. That takes months. We have 3 days. Then we need public support. Media coverage, protests, anything to make this costly for the Dravesh politically. Daniel pulled out his datapad and started making calls. His old military contacts were sympathetic but unhelpful. Nobody wanted to provoke the Dravesh Empire over one dragon. Humanity's position in galactic politics was still fragile after the war. Risking it for Pyra seemed foolish to those who valued stability over principle. But help came from unexpected places. Ruth, the market vendor, spread word through the slums about what was happening. The people who lived in New Haven's forgotten corners understood what it meant to be thrown away. They knew Pyra had helped Daniel repair dangerous infrastructure and had warned them about a structural collapse that saved lives. She was one of them now. By the second day, protesters had gathered outside the administrative center. Humans mostly, but also a few aliens from other species who had suffered under Dravesh cultural imperialism. They carried signs and chanted slogans about freedom and choice. It was not enough to stop an empire, but it was something. Rebecca filed an emergency appeal with the Galactic Council. She argued that Pyra had demonstrated clear sentience, sophisticated communication abilities, and the right to self-determination. She included all their research, showing how Pyra's mind worked and how her abilities represented conscious choice rather than instinct. On the third day, Dravesh warships appeared in orbit, not diplomatic vessels but actual military cruisers. The message was clear. King Osmar was done negotiating. Daniel stood in his apartment with Pyra, Rebecca, and a handful of friends from the slums who refused to abandon them. They had no plan, no real hope. But they had each other, and sometimes that had to be enough. A hologram activated in the center of the room. King Osmar appeared, massive and terrible in his full regalia. His crimson scales seemed to burn with inner fire, and his eyes held nothing but cold fury. You have defied my decree, Daniel Hayes. You have corrupted my daughter with false promises and human arrogance. This ends now. With respect, Your Majesty, the only thing corrupt here is a father who abandoned his child because she didn't meet his expectations. Daniel stepped between the hologram and Pyra. She's not broken. She's extraordinary, and I'll die before I let you take her. You may get your wish. Soldiers are en route to your location. You will surrender Pyra, or you will be removed by force. Then you'll have to remove me. Daniel heard his voice steady despite everything. Because she's staying with me. Not because I own her. Because she chose this, you took away her voice. I helped her find it again. That's not corruption. That's called being human. Heavy boots echoed in the stairwell. The soldiers were coming. Pyra moved beside Daniel, humming a frequency that shook the windows. She would not go quietly. Neither would he. King Osmar studied them through the hologram. For just a moment, something flickered in those ancient eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or maybe regret. But it vanished quickly, replaced by imperial authority. So be it, the king said. Face the consequences of your choice. The door burst open. 6 Dravesh soldiers filled the small apartment, their armor gleaming and weapons ready. They formed a semicircle around Daniel and Pyra, blocking any escape. Behind them, protesters pushed against barriers the soldiers had erected in the hallway. Voices shouted support, but they could not reach inside. The lead soldier, a scarred veteran with deep green scales, stepped forward. Stand aside, human. We have orders to retrieve the princess. Resist and you will be removed. She's not going anywhere, Daniel said. His voice surprised him with its steadiness. Not unless she chooses to. Pyra moved in front of Daniel, her body low and ready. Her humming filled the room, a deep vibration that made the soldiers shift uncomfortably. She was young and small compared to them, but her presence dominated the space. The resonance chamber Rebecca had built was still active, translating her emotions into sound that everyone could hear. I will not return. I will not be silenced again. The soldier hesitated. Princess, your father commands your return. It is not our place to question royal decrees. I am not his possession. Pyra's voice resonated through the chamber. I am my own being. I choose where I belong. The hologram of King Osmar still hovered in the room watching. Daniel saw something shift in the king's expression. He had heard his daughter's voice, truly heard it, perhaps for the first time. Outside, the protest had grown. News cameras had arrived, broadcasting the standoff across the galaxy. Daniel could see the screens through the window, showing his apartment surrounded by soldiers while crowds demanded Pyra's freedom. What had started as a local dispute was becoming an interstellar incident. Rebecca pushed through the soldiers, brandishing her data pad. I have a preliminary response from the Galactic Council for Species Rights. They're ordering a stay on any forced removal until a full hearing can be conducted. The soldier checked his own communications. We have no such orders. Then you're about to create a diplomatic nightmare. Taking her by force while a council order is pending will make the Dravish Empire look like tyrants who ignore galactic law. Torvus, the silver-scaled diplomat, appeared beside King Osmar's hologram. He whispered something urgent. The king's expression grew darker, but Daniel recognized the calculation happening. The Dravish valued honor and appearance. This situation was spiraling beyond their control. Father? Pyra's voice, translated through her resonance, cut through the tension. Look at me. Really look at me. King Osmar's massive head turned to focus on the hologram feed showing his daughter. Pyra stepped into the light, allowing the cameras to capture her fully. She was thin compared to her siblings, her scales less brilliant. But there was strength in her bearing that could not be denied. You cast me out because I could not sing your songs, Pyra continued. But you never asked what songs I could sing. You never wondered if there was more to communication than flame and sound. You saw weakness where there was difference. You saw curse where there was gift. She demonstrated, humming a complex series of frequencies. The resonance chamber amplified her voice, causing the very air to shimmer. Patterns formed in the space around her, visible manifestations of harmonic interference. Water vapor in the air crystallized into temporary ice sculptures. Metal objects hummed in sympathetic vibration. The datapad in Rebecca's hand lit up with streams of data as Pyra's voice interfaced directly with its systems. The Dravesh soldiers stepped back, awestruck. They had never seen anything like this. Their flame songs were beautiful but limited to artistic expression. Pyra's abilities were something else entirely. She was speaking to reality itself, bending physics with nothing but her voice. This is what you threw away, Daniel said quietly. Not a cursed child, but a pioneer. The first of her kind to discover something new. King Osmar stared at the display. His claws gripped the armrests of his throne so hard the metal groaned. When he spoke, his voice was barely controlled. You dare suggest I was wrong? That centuries of tradition are meaningless? I'm suggesting that traditions should serve people, not destroy them. Daniel met the king's gaze through the hologram. She's your daughter. You brought her into this world. You owe her the chance to be herself, not a copy of what you wanted her to be." The silence stretched. Outside, the crowd had gone quiet, watching the screens to see what would happen. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Pyra spoke again. "I do not hate you, Father. I know you believed you were following our laws, protecting our culture. But your laws almost killed what I could become. Daniel did not corrupt me. He freed me to be who I truly am." She approached the hologram as close as the projection allowed. "I am Dravesh. I am your daughter. But I am also something you have never seen before, and that terrifies you. I understand.
Change is frightening.
But destroying what you fear is not strength. Accepting it is." King Osmar's ancient eyes closed. When they opened, something had shifted. "You would stay with this human? You would reject your heritage? I would choose my own path. If that path leads me back to the Dravesh homeworld one day, it will be my choice made freely. Not because I was forced or because I had no other option," Torvis whispered urgently again. The political situation was untenable. Forcing Pyra to return now would make the Dravesh Empire look weak and tyrannical. But backing down would acknowledge the king's initial judgment was wrong. It was an impossible position. King Osmar rose from his throne. His massive form filled the hologram projection, and for a moment Daniel was certain he would order the soldiers to take Pyra by force, consequences be damned. But instead the king spoke with cold formality. "I will allow Pyra to remain under human guardianship with formal legal recognition. Daniel Hayes, you are hereby appointed her official guardian with all rights and responsibilities that entails." His gaze hardened. "But understand this, she will return to our homeworld when she is ready to teach others her abilities. This is not abandonment. This is education. She will bring this new form of communication to our people." "When I'm ready," Pyra confirmed. "Not when you command it." The king nodded once, a tiny acknowledgement that cost him everything. When you are ready, he vanished. The soldiers lowered their weapons and filed out. Outside, the crowd erupted in celebration. 6 months transformed everything. The modest stipend from King Osmar had turned into a substantial grant, officially designated for Pyra's education and care. Daniel suspected it was actually guilt money, but he accepted it anyway. They had moved from the cramped apartment to a larger facility on the edge of New Haven's research district, a place with room for Pyra to grow and proper equipment for studying her abilities. Rebecca had established a formal research center focused on xenocommunication. Scientists from across the galaxy sent requests to study with them. Some wanted to understand Pyra's resonance abilities for academic purposes. Others saw practical applications in medicine, engineering, and even space exploration. The once cursed dragon had become the most studied being on New Haven, but the most important changes were the visitors who arrived quietly, without fanfare. They came alone or in small groups, always at night when few would see them. Dravesh, who had been cast out for various imperfections, dragons who could not produce flame hot enough, whose songs carried the wrong pitch, whose scales bore unusual colors, the rejected children of an empire that valued conformity above all else. Daniel found one such visitor waiting outside the center on a cold evening. She was young, barely more than a hatchling, with pale blue scales that shimmered like ice. She flinched when he approached. "I am looking for Princess Pyra," she said softly. "They say she helps those like me. Come inside. You're safe here." The young dragon followed him into the main chamber where Pyra had grown considerably. She was now the size of a small horse, her bronze scales healthy and gleaming. When she saw the visitor, Pyra's whole demeanor softened. She approached gently, humming a welcoming frequency. The young dragon's name was Silvara. She had been cast out because her flame burned silver instead of the traditional red and gold. Her family believed it was a sign of contamination, a genetic flaw that brought shame. She had nowhere to go. "You're not flawed," Pyra told her through the resonance chamber. "You're unique. And there is strength in being different." Over the following weeks, Silvara learned to embrace her silver flame. Pyra taught her that different did not mean lesser. Rebecca discovered that Silvara's flame had unusual properties, burning cooler but lasting far longer than traditional Dravesh fire. It was perfect for controlled applications where sustained heat was needed. More outcasts arrived. Daniel lost count of how many dragons had passed through their doors. Some stayed only briefly before finding their own paths. Others remained, forming a small community of the rejected learning to value themselves again. One afternoon, Daniel was repairing equipment when a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. A Drevesh soldier, scarred and weathered, scales a deep green. Daniel recognized him immediately. The lead soldier who had come to take Pyra all those months ago. "I mean no harm," the soldier said quickly. Seeing Daniel's defensive posture, "I came to speak with Princess Pyra if she will permit it." Pyra emerged from the back chambers, now large enough to look the soldier in the eye. She studied him carefully, then hummed a cautious greeting. The soldier bowed low, a gesture of deep respect. "My name is Rothak. I am the one Commander Rothak you saved during the war, Daniel Hayes. I am also Captain Rothak, leader of the King's Guard." He straightened. "I come bearing a message from King Osmar, but also a personal request." "The king wants something?" Daniel's voice carried an edge. "He wants nothing except to extend an invitation. When Pyra is ready, truly ready, she is welcome to return to the homeworld, not as a prisoner but as a teacher. There are others like Silvara, hidden away because their families fear the shame of imperfection. The king has decreed that they should be given a choice, to remain hidden or to seek Princess Pyra's guidance." Pyra's humming filled the chamber. Through the translation matrix, her voice resonated with complex emotions. Satisfaction, vindication, but also caution. "My father sent you to say this?" "He did. But I came because I needed to see for myself what you have built here." Rothak looked around at the young dragons practicing their unique abilities, at the humans and aliens working together to understand them. "You have created something our empire has never known. A place where difference is valued, not punished. That is worth more than any flame song." "Tell my father I will return one day," Pyra said. "But not yet. There is still work to do here. Still outcasts who need to learn they are not broken." Rothak nodded. "I will tell him. And I will also tell him that his daughter has become everything a princess should be, not through conquest or tradition, but through compassion and courage." He left with the same formality he had arrived with. Daniel watched him go, then turned to Pyra. "You really going to go back eventually?" "Yes, but on my terms, when I can return not as the cursed child who got lucky, but as someone who changed what it means to be Drevesh." She hummed softly. "Because of you. You showed me that being cast out was not an ending, it was a beginning." They stood together watching the young dragons practice their abilities. Silvara's silver flame danced through the air, beautiful and strange. Another dragon, one with asymmetrical wings, was learning to use her unique balance to perform aerial maneuvers impossible for symmetrical flyers, each one discovering that their differences were not curses but possibilities. Daniel pulled out his old harmonica and played a simple melody. Pyra hummed along, their sounds interweaving in a harmony that was neither human nor Drevesh but something entirely new. The young dragons stopped to listen, drawn to the music that spoke of two worlds coming together. "You know what I think?" Daniel said between notes. "I think the galaxy judges strength all wrong. They measure it in weapons and fire, in conformity and tradition. But real strength is accepting that you might be wrong. Real courage is changing when you need to." Pyra's humming deepened, resonating through the building. "And real family is choosing to stand beside someone even when the whole galaxy says you should not." "Yeah, that too." Outside, New Haven's sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Ships came and went from the spaceport, carrying beings of 1,000 different species to 1,000 different destinations. The galaxy was vast and varied, full of differences that some saw as weaknesses and others saw as opportunities. Inside the center, the music continued. A broken veteran and a rejected princess teaching anyone who would listen that being different was not a curse. It was a voice crying out to be heard, waiting for someone brave enough to listen, and the galaxy was finally learning to hear.